Okay, so I'm starting now the session from singleness to oneness. We're on session 8 today. And remember that we've already covered from the 4 areas of oneness. We went through the structure aspect of spiritual oneness, emotional part of interaction for oneness. And we are currently on the section of physical oneness, which deals with sexuality. So we started this section last week. Today we will do the second part of it. Next week we will move into the 4th category, which is legal oneness. So in session 8, we're going to be talking about how to build an adultery-proof marriage. And the key question that we're going to be asking in this session is, how are you protecting your marriage from adultery? What we're going to understand as the key concept is that protecting your marriage from adultery requires an intentional strategy. So I know that last week we discovered that whenever we talk about sexuality, depending on your background, whether it be your personal background or your cultural background, will determine the way you relate to the topic. But regardless of your personal background or cultural background, if you are going to build a marriage that has physical oneness, you have to start looking at sexuality from the perspective of God as the designer and his purpose for it, and move away from the distortions of it. And today in this session, we're going to take that concept a little bit farther and looking into the kind of like the other side of the coin. Last week, the side of the coin we looked into was, how to have a marriage that is sexually satisfying. But today we are going to be looking at the other dimension of how to ensure that the sexual satisfaction only remains in your marriage and you build it and protect it so that it will not fall prey to adultery. So let me start with a couple of case studies, okay? These are very simple case studies based on some of my years of counseling couples. So let me start with the first one. Sam and Jill run a small family business. After coming back from a vacation, Sam brought a gift for his secretary to show appreciation for her hard work. What is the wisest thing to do? So let's go and work with you, Brandon and Hannah, since you guys are in that category of small business owners, right? So let's see. What do you think should happen? A, for Sam to give the gift to his secretary and say, hey, I saw this and I thought of you. I hope you like it. B, for Jill, the wife, to give it to the secretary and say, hey, this is from us. We really appreciate what you do for our business. Or C, never give gifts to anyone in order to avoid being misinterpreted. What do you think, would be the wise thing to do?
I would say C, but I know that's not the right answer.
Okay. So C is like eliminates the problem completely, right?
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
Okay.
No issues.
But it's
but
maybe
B
overreacting.
I would say B is the correct one.
So B would be better. B. Why not A?
Because that may create some tension between, well, it's almost like there's a little bit of something there between Sam and the secretary, and we don't want to create any tension between Sam and Jill. From my point of view.
Okay.
So, oh, look at that. Oh.
That was cool.
So yeah, I mean, I would let the wife do it.
A will create misunderstanding.
Unless it's a male secretary, then Sam can give it to him.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it has the potential to create a misunderstanding, right? Misunderstanding from whose perspective? The wife or the secretary?
For both, for the wife
For both.
and for the secretary too.
Yeah.
Okay. And in what way will the misunderstanding be for the wife, and in what way will be for the secretary?
For the wife may think that there's something going on between Sam and Jill.
Why were you thinking about her?
Okay.
Or between
Yeah.
Sam and the secretary.
Yeah.
For the secretary, she may think that, oh, my boss likes me.
Yeah,
Okay.
why is my boss
Yeah.
giving me a gift?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right on target. On the surface, it's a very innocent, kind of naive thing. It's like, oh, hey, let's get her something. There's nothing wrong in the intention of it, but here what they are not understanding and not being wise about is understanding how some of these lack of boundaries for the relationship are protecting the marriage from these things. So in the real case, the wife was not happy with the husband because the husband brought the gift to the secretary, and the husband was upset with the wife because there was nothing to it, and he was thinking, you're just being jealous, you're being overprotective, don't be so uptight. And the wife was saying, no, it's not that I don't trust you. So I had to work with them in helping them understand that, you see, the reason why this is a risk and not wise is because typically an affair does not start in the bed. It starts with an emotional connection. And here the problem is that if the secretary feels that, hey, he notices me, he is thinking about me, she starts feeling like, oh, an emotional connection that's there. So I had to explain that if his intention was to encourage her, then there was a way to do that. And that was for the wife to come and say, hey, we bought you this. And it's like, we did, right? And changes completely, right? And the wife completely agreed. She said, yep, exactly. So I had to help him understand that he was being naive, and that part of our role in marriage, if you are going to protect your marriage from adultery, is that you have to start thinking about those boundaries. Not because you distrust your husband or your wife, but because you know that outside circumstances can develop and infiltrate into the marriage. So thankfully, both of them understood, and that solved the issue. So right on target. Okay, so Hannah, you pick who you want to deal with the second case.
Oh,
We don't even know what it is yet.
Rachel, she on second on my screen.
Okay, so Rachel, we'll go with you for the next one. Okay, so Ruth is feeling emotionally distant in her marriage. What should she do? Okay, she's kind of like discouraged, disappointed perhaps, it's like not happy right now. So A, confide in her co-worker Joe, who is a kind man, seek the help of a counselor, or talk to her husband about her frustrations. Is that a selected answer, or is that a no answer? Okay, so either B or C. Let's see, why B or C? And which one of those two would you choose first?
I think C first. C first, yeah.
Okay. Why C first?
Because I think the problem is still controlled, right? So like it can be improved. It can be through prayer, conversations, and I think that's like controllable. Emotions too, like from Ruth herself, it's controllable too, but she can be open about her feelings and then work out a plan improvement, a PIP, performance improvement plan.
Yeah. So
Um,
so right. So if and addressing the situation with her husband, then there's a possibility of solving it and not making it grow more. If after talking to him, things do not improve, then perhaps go with a counselor and try to seek outside help. Right. Now, why not A? Joe is a kind man. We work together. He's a friend.
there are a lot of kind men out there. Yeah, so it's a principle, right? Being faithful in marriage. Yeah, and like emotions fluctuate all the time, so it's not a signal for you to act that way either. Like there's no way for you to act that way either. Anyways,
Okay.
yeah, so it's against God. To my Holy Spirit conviction.
Okay.
Shouldn't do that.
So you think you shouldn't do that? It's not the right thing to do. Right. So what is the risk of going with A?
Yeah, it's like what you said one time, right? So the one thing lead to another. It could be a lead to something that will destroy the marriage or hurt the marriage a lot.
Yeah. Right. And again, you're right on target, because one of the things we need to remember is that an affair does not start in the bedroom. Typically, an affair starts with a physical connection. I mean, an emotional connection that leads to a physical connection, right? So remember the story of the couple that the wife shared her story, how she left the husband and committed adultery, and then eventually they went back together. In her story, she said that when she was growing dissatisfied with her marriage, she started confiding in a coworker. They took a business trip, and that's when she opened up. And he was also struggling in his marriage, so then he opened up, and suddenly they're both sharing their hearts. And what are they establishing? An emotional connection. See, and once they establish that emotional connection, it's like a magnet. It's like, you're too close, at any moment it can stop you, and before you know it, it's like you end up in an affair, and you never even imagined you were going to end up there, right? So thank you, Rachel. What you see in these two cases is that on the surface they are not they don't have bad intentions. These are decisions that people make that, rather than having bad intentions, they're simply naive. They're not thinking about the potential consequences. And because that is not their intent, they just go with it. And before they know it, they find themselves in situations that are rather dangerous for their marriage. That is preventable. Okay. So what I want to share with you, and if you just give me 1 second to hear the audio, I'm going to show you a short video that has nothing to do with the topic. Okay, it has nothing to do with marriage or infidelity or any of this stuff. It's a video about a patient that got COVID, and he's in Florida from the hospital bed, recording a message to people, and he posted it on YouTube for people to see. So I want you to see what he says, and how he's reacting to the whole thing, and then we will establish what is the connection with with the topic today. But let's see. So let me do this here. You should be able to hear it now. Let's see.
I didn't wear a mask. I should have. I didn't. I believe this was just a flu. That it was all gonna go away. That it was political. I didn't think a mask would help. If wearing a mask can reduce your chances of getting this, even by 5%, just wear a mask. Do it for your children, for your loved ones. Do it for yourself. I listened to the wrong people say the wrong things. I was wrong. Can't be more wrong. Just a small update. Breathing is better. I'm down to this instead of the high flow. It's not just masks. It's masks. It's social distancing. It's cleaning your hands. It's avoiding contact unless you absolutely have to. In Florida, people are acting like there's nothing wrong. I really pray that everybody can take the politics out of it. I didn't. I was a jackass. It just got politicized. It should have never been politicized.
Okay, so that's just a 2-minute story, right? Headphones. And okay, can you hear me okay again? It's good. Okay. So what do you think about his story? He's obviously, you know, sick in bed, suffering from these symptoms that he didn't anticipate. What's his main point? What's he doing? Now let's go with Eli and Trey.
So I think especially like the way, I don't know if you're asking how it relates to what we're talking about tonight, but it was kind of in the sense that there were things that he could have done to prevent himself getting COVID or to reduce the chances of him getting COVID, and he wasn't taking it seriously. So similarly, like there are things that we can and should do in marriages that reduce the chance of adultery and then of divorce. But if you don't take it seriously, then you could end up there without even realizing it. Because it was like he didn't even like, you know, he wasn't intentionally going out to get COVID, but because he wasn't doing any of the precautions, it increased his chances of getting it.
Exactly right. And he's thinking, you know, it's just like a flu, it's nothing, not big deal. You know, so the husband that tells the wife, it's not a big deal, it's just a gift from my secretary, you know, there's nothing to it, you are, you know, you are thinking too much about it. The attitudes that people have about marriage, it's sad because many end up in that bed suffering later, thinking, oh, I wish, you know, I would have taken this seriously and I would have taken the necessary precautions. So one of the things that you're going to see in this session is that the adultery, infidelity is very much like the dynamics with the pandemic. Adultery is a pandemic. I do not know, but if you were just to go like this and tell me, do any of you know someone who committed adultery or a marriage that ended because of infidelity? Yeah. See, right. So that is just to show you, right, that just like the virus, you know, infidelity is a pandemic, but many people do not take it seriously, and the devastation that happens in the relationships and with the children and everything is really hard. So one of the things that we need to ask in this session is, how do you see infidelity? Because the way you see it is going to either create distance or closeness in your marriage. So the way people think of infidelity, there are three ways that typically people approach this topic. One is the people that say, hey, you know, it's no big deal, this is normal. You know, it happens to everybody does it. So you just have to accept that at some point, there's going to be infidelity in your marriage. And that's part of life, you know, it's normal. So these are like the people that say, you know, don't wear masks, don't get vaccines. If you get it, you get it. And once you get it, you'll survive. You know, it's no big deal. Your body will recover from it. You know, that kind of attitude towards the virus. Same attitude towards infidelity. It's like, you're going to get it. It will happen to you. And when it happens, then you move on. So this attitude of thinking of infidelity as something that is acceptable and you should expect it is very common in the context where they have the macho structure. Do you remember the macho structure that thinks, you know, the man is superior, the woman is inferior, and you stay home and I work outside? And that kind of mindset, typically in those cultures, the men are expected to have the wife that takes care of the house and also have a lover that takes care of the bedroom, you know, and they live with that arrangement. So the wife that lives in that arrangement lives frustrated all her life because on the one hand, she has the financial stability that the husband provides. And because of that financial stability, then she's willing to live with the arrangement, knowing that he has a lover, but not wanting that be the case, but that's the case. And you will find that kind of practice commonly accepted in many cultures that are more macho structure cultures. You see it often in Latin American countries as well as Muslim countries, where these trends are very strong. However, if the wife is the one that is committing adultery, practicing infidelity, then that's not acceptable, you see. But if the man is, then it's like, well, you know, that's what men do. Do you remember the story of Jesus when he is at the temple and they bring her this adulterous woman and they're ready to stone her? Remember that story? You know what is interesting about that story is that it reflects this mindset. It's like the religious leaders that bring her to Jesus, they accuse her. Did you remember what is the accusation? They tell Jesus, this woman.
They got her in the act of,
Yeah. So this woman was caught in the very act of adultery, right? So what does the law of Moses say we should do with her, you know? And it's like, wait, if that was the case, what's wrong with that picture? Why are they just bringing the woman? Where's the guy? Right? So that simply reflects the cultural perception, you see. When in this kind of cultures or structure, they accept it as something normal, except that if it's the wife that is doing it. Needless to say, that will never lead to oneness in the marriage, and they're always going to live separate from each other. In fact, many of them end up sleeping in separate beds, and that's how they grow old, sleeping in separate beds, separate bedrooms sometimes too. And they become simply a business partnership. The Bible says in Proverbs 30:20, something that summarizes the attitude behind this. It says, this is the way of an adulteress. She eats and wipes her mouth and says, I've done nothing wrong. It's like she just got out of the very act of adultery, and it's like moves on, new day, and nothing has happened. Just like I just ate, and what's wrong with eating? Nothing. So I remember that I saw this attitude once that really shocked me. I was coming to my office in like about 8 in the morning, and right in between the buildings, before we enclosed the space, these two teenagers were in the very act of it. So as I got out of my car, they both jumped out, got separated. The guy started pulling his pants up, and I was there standing like in shock, thinking, what in the world? First of all, it's 8 in the morning. Secondly, this is a private property. Third, this is a church. Fourth, you are teenagers. It's like, what's going on? And I decided not to call the police, but I did decide to talk to them and tell them, this is wrong. This is private property. You should not be doing this here. So I walked out. I walked with them, to the edge of the property and dismissed them. But during that time of walking together, the guy was very kind of embarrassed, his head down, but the girl wasn't. So the girl, with a very arrogant attitude, said to me, if God is the one that made sex, then what a better place to do it than a church? So exactly, it's like, really? Is that what you are thinking? So I had 5 seconds to decide, what do I do? And I concluded that if she was so foolish as to say what she just had said, then I was not going to waste any words in trying to argue with her, because she was, not in the right place physically and also mentally, right? So, but basically, this is what Proverbs says. The adulterous person, it says, I've done nothing wrong. What's the big deal? In fact, God delights in this. So that is the first perspective on infidelity and adultery. That is not the biblical perspective, right? The second perspective is different. The second perspective is one that says it will never happen to me. This is the couple that thinks that sexual immorality, adultery, infidelity happens to the lowest of people, with people that have low morals, people that don't know God, people that do not go to church, perhaps people that are messed up, but it will never happen to me. To my husband, no, we are at a complete different level, and this couple is right in thinking that infidelity is something to be, not desired, and that it's not acceptable and it's not normal. But they are completely wrong in thinking that it will never happen to me. Time and time again, I have been saddened by people that I respected so much to find later in the news that they had to step down from their ministries, they had to separate from their wives because of adultery. And on one occasion, I remember that I was having breakfast with a friend who is a pastor, and he said, we just heard in our church, was a large church, that our worship pastor had to be let go because he had committed adultery with another person at the church, and the church was very sad, about what had happened. So he said to me, Pablo, when things like this happen, it makes me realize that we're all adulterous. We just haven't done it yet. And what he meant was, we all have the potential to do it. The fact that we have not done it doesn't mean that we don't have the potential for it. So his reflection was one of, self-awareness and setting boundaries, and don't be self-confident. And this is where this couple fails, because this couple is very self-confident and underestimates the power that adultery can have in their relationship. And therefore they lower their guards completely. They are not setting boundaries to protect their marriage because they think that's not needed. Why? Because that will never happen to me. Look at what the Bible says in these two passages. This is Mark 7. This is Jesus talking in Mark 7:21 through 23. For from within, out of men's hearts, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and make a man unclean. He's talking to the religious leaders about these things because they were very legalistic in having all these regulations to protect people from being unclean from external things. But Jesus says, no. What it really makes you unclean is what comes from within. And what comes from within, he says, all this list of behaviors. He's telling us, look, if you have the sinful nature, then you have the sinful potential for any of these things to manifest themselves. If the right or the wrong list of factors accumulate and suddenly is the perfect storm, all these sinful potential can come out. So he makes it very clear that within the heart, there's the potential for these things. And later, the Apostle Paul in Galatians chapter 6, verse 1, gave instructions of how to correct someone, how to help someone that has fallen into any of these, sad, sinful behaviors. And look at what he says in 6:1. Brothers, if someone is caught in a sin, you who are spiritual should restore him gently. But watch yourself, or you also may be tempted. It's interesting. You see, the emphasis is saying it's like, if somebody has fallen, needs to be restored, so go and restore that person, but do it gently, not with an attitude of superiority of thinking, oh, poor you, you're messed up, let me help you stand up. That will never happen to me. No, he says, do it with an attitude that knows that it could be you. And thank God that it's not you, but it could be. So says, watch yourself, because you could also fall for it. So the biblical perspective completely contradicts this attitude of the second perspective that says that will never happen to me. In fact, it's much more humbling. It says you have the potential for it, therefore be careful, watch out, set boundaries so that you won't fall for it. So let's do a little review here. Let's go with Trey. You complete this chart here. You can read it out loud.
Okay. Sexual immorality and adultery come from.
Starts with an I. Inside, yeah, internal.
Oh, okay. Inside.
We're on the inside,
And make the person unclean.
Right. And the next one?
A spiritually mature person should help. What's the word I'm thinking of? Rehabilitate.
Restore, yeah.
Yeah, restore.
Yeah. Restore.
You're thinking of fancier words.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got it right. Restore the one who sinned.
Yeah, the one who sinned, not with a self-confident attitude, but knowing that anybody can be tempted.
Right. Exactly. So that's what we just read about, right? So this summarizes the concept. So as you can see, the first two perspectives of infidelity are not right. It is not normal. It's not something that all people do, and therefore you need to get used to it. It is not something that only happens to the worst of people and it will never happen to me. Rather, the perspective of a couple that experiences oneness, sustainably so, is a couple that understands that infidelity can come uninvited to their relationship, and therefore it has to be intentionally avoided. You set boundaries in place. You make sure that there are certain things that you are doing and not doing to ensure that the relationship is free from any of these cracks that can turn into a big hole in the relationship. So that's the contrast between these three perspectives. And if you are going to succeed in building an adultery-proof marriage, you have to be thinking as the couple that is in the third category. It's something that has to be intentionally avoided. Now, let me take you through a couple of passages from the Bible that talk about this attitude. This is the Apostle Paul again, talking in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, 15 through 20. And he's going to talk about a problem that was happening in that city. Corinth, where these people live in Greece, was a port city. And like many port cities where you have sailors that come and go, there's a business of prostitution that is growing. So many of the people that became followers of Jesus were engaged with those kind of practices. And now some of them that were following Jesus still were engaged with some of those practices. So they really were struggling with sexual immorality in different shapes. So this is what the Apostle Paul writes to them. And he says in verse 15, do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ himself? Shall I then take the members of Christ and unite them with a prostitute? Never. Do you not know that he who unites himself with a prostitute is one with her in body? For it is said, the two will become one flesh. And then in verse 18 it says, flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a man commits are outside his body, but he who sins sexually sins against his own body. Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your body. Did you notice that he asked 3 times the question, do you not know? And he's going to ask that question to say, this is something you should know. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ himself? Do you not know that the one who unites himself with a prostitute is one with her in body? Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? The whole point that he's making here is very important. He says, look, the moment you became a follower of Jesus, now you are part of God's people. Now you belong to his people. Therefore, the body that you have is not anymore just your body. You belong to God. And if you belong to God, your body belongs to God. Therefore, you should not take what belongs to God and use it for purposes that dishonor God. It's like, imagine that my son takes my car and starts driving it without my permission and without a driver's license, and then crashes it. It's like, wait, why did you take my car and drove it without my permission and crashed it? This is what the Apostle Paul is saying. It's like, why are you taking the body that is not yours to use it for a purpose that is not God's purpose? That's not how it works. You have to start thinking of your body as something that belongs to God, and therefore you have to use it for God's purposes. that honor him, not purposes that dishonor him. And sexual immorality is something that dishonors God. And the second thing that he points out is that he says, look, do you not know that the one who unites himself with a prostitute is one with her in body? For it is said the two will become one flesh. See, he's saying the very act of sexuality with this other person is an expression of oneness. That's the whole idea of the act with your spouse. This is an expression of oneness. Why, therefore, are you going to engage in this sexual act with a person that you are not one with? And this is at the core, the problem of any sexual intercourse that happens with a person that is not your spouse. Because you are taking something that God designed as an expression for oneness, and you are expressing it with someone that you're not one with. And that's why it will always feel wrong. It may feel physically pleasurable, but it will feel spiritually and emotionally wrong. And the third thing that he says here is the attitude. He says, therefore, since this sexual act is an expression of oneness, and your body belongs to God, not to you, whenever you are facing the potential for sexual immorality, there's only one right response. And what is that right response? Right there. Flee from it. Don't entertain it. Don't think it will never happen to me. No, flee from it. Because the moment you start feeling that there's a potential for something happening there, you immediately set those boundaries and walk out. So this section is very important. He's like right to the point, developing these concepts, explaining God's perspective on infidelity and how we should think about it. Now, there's this other passage in Proverbs chapter 5, verse 8 through 14. But I'm going to read here through verse 11. Keep your path far from the adulterous one. Do not go near the door of her house. Lest you give your best strength to others and your years to one who is cruel. Lest strangers feast on your wealth and your toil enrich another man's house. At the end of your life, you will groan when your flesh and body are spent. I love that description. It's like, do you want me to tell you what's going to happen after? You're going to suffer for it. You're going to suffer so much that you will get to the point that you will wish it never happened, but it's too late. You're going to end up in legal problems. You're going to end up in financial problems. You're going to end up in loneliness, depression. You know, all these things will come with the package. Therefore, if you see a person that is flirting with you, a person that is inviting you for an adulterous relationship, flee from it, said Paul. And Proverbs says, keep your path far from that person. If you need to switch jobs, switch jobs. If you need to just change your phone number, change your phone number. Whatever you need to do, don't get close to that person. I was talking to a couple once where the husband says, we were at this restaurant and I went with my wife, and I went to the restroom. And as I was walking to the restroom, waiting there outside, this other woman waiting outside the restroom as well, and she was very friendly and flirtatious. So, I just was trying to be nice and I went to the restroom and then came out and sat down. at the table. And then she passed by the table and dropped a piece of paper right there at on the table for him with her phone number. And he said, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. I was not even looking for anything. And this woman just was, trying to, get me. And he felt very bad with his wife, because his wife was there. It's like, what's going on? Why did she give you that? What did you tell her? What? So she became very distrusting. So, but that's true. There are people that the Bible describes as the adulterous one. This is the person that is seeking you for their purpose. And whenever you find that, you have to just walk away from their path completely, because the moment you think, oh, only once, nobody will know, it's that you are duped. Then there is a third passage, also from Proverbs. Look at chapter 6, verse 32 and 33. But a man who commits adultery lacks judgment. Whoever does so destroys himself. Blows and disgrace are his lot, and his shame will never be wiped away. It says, look, if after everything I've told you, you still go and do it, then you lack judgment. It's like you are missing something, because why in the world would you go and do something like that? The consequences that you're going to carry for life will never go away. And, even in the couples that God has restored after an adulterous crisis, there's always the sadness of what happened. There's always the sadness of, yeah, I was unfaithful. Thank God that he restored us and my spouse forgave me, but yeah, I did it. And you can see the sadness in the person's eyes. The shame will never be wiped away, says Proverbs. So when you look at what the Bible says about these things, it's not ambiguous or soft. It really makes it like, look, it could happen to you, therefore flee from it. And if you ever get visited by someone that is known to be adulterous, you don't even get close to that person. Just walk away. Don't even think twice about it, because the consequences down the road are worse than what you can ever imagine. And here I love the phrase that summarizes this concept. I heard it once from a guy that was talking about this thing when I was a youth myself. And he said, sin will always cost you more than what you're willing to pay, and will always take you farther than what you're willing to go. At the beginning, it seems like, oh, it's no big deal. Nothing bad is going to happen. Oh, it's not going to cost much. But once you're duped and you fall for it, it's going to cost you more than what you wanted to pay. And you're going to end up way farther than you thought you were ever going to end up. So with this in mind, let's do the little review section. Trey, you did the last one. Pick the person you want to do the second review.
You have to pick.
I will pick Jack.
Okay, Jack, can you hear us? If you can hear us, remember to unmute your mic.
Pastor Pablo, I'm sorry, I may not be able to answer this question right now. It's I just got home and didn't follow very well. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. So well. So let's give you a hint. So pick a helper, Jack.
Can I get Trey to help me? Thanks.
Okay, Trey. So you become the helper. That's great. Okay, so now he's gonna be your helper, not your answer, right? So let's give it a try. The first part says we must do something from sexual immorality. What would that be? Okay, Trey, any hints?
I believe it's flee.
Yeah, we must flee from sexual immorality. That's what the passage says, right? It's like run from it. B, the sexual act is an expression of becoming. What is it?
Oh, just answer.
Okay, Trey, you go.
I believe it's becoming one flesh.
Yeah, that's what it is, right? That's what Paul said. You know, when you become physically, sexually engaged with the other person, is you're becoming one flesh, and that was the purpose of the very act, was representing an expression of that oneness. So why do it with someone that you're not one with? Therefore, it should not be practiced outside marriage, right? C, our body is not our.
I don't think Jack knows he's supposed to respond.
I think
Yeah, and I guess, sorry, I guess Jack, we're going to take, since you picked Trey, well, Trey will give the answers then. Go ahead.
yeah, we can do that. I believe it's our body is not our own.
Uh-huh.
We have been bought with a price. Therefore, we must honor God with our body.
Right. Uh-huh. Good. And D?
A person who commits adultery lacks judgment and
Dooms.
No.
I don't know. I don't know what it is.
I think it might be dishonor. Is it dishonor?
No. No.
Or is it
That's
doom?
it. That's it. Look at the verse.
Yeah, we don't.
Verse
Oh,
32.
Oh, destroys.
Destroys. Right. There you go. Yeah. Destroys himself. It's like you're doing something against yourself. You know?
Rachel,
So,
did you deceive?
yeah. Yeah, so these little reviews are meant to, you know, bring the highlights from the verses that we just read, right? So we remember the concepts. So here we go. Okay, so if the Bible is so specifically, you know, so strong in giving warnings against this, what I want to do in this last section of the study is then say, okay, then how do you build an adultery-proof marriage? If this is something that I need to set boundaries, that I need to be careful about, then how do I go about doing that? So in order to get to this section, what I'm going to do is that we are going to move from what the Bible says now to the things that I have learned in all of my years of counseling couples and working with different issues that couples have brought throughout their lives. So here, what I want you to see, actually go back to this slide first. What I want you to see here is that the perspective between the couple that has oneness and the one that doesn't is that they, sorry, I keep going back and forth. It's like I'm trying to move you guys in the screen so I can see better. Okay, there. The couple that has oneness is very intentional about it. The couple that doesn't, and that ends up suffering from it, what they experience is what I call erosion. Okay, there are things that start eroding the relationship that eventually lead to infidelity or adultery. Adultery, infidelity typically doesn't happen out of the blue overnight. It is the outcome of several factors that accumulate with time. So I like the picture of erosion when you think about these things, because it illustrates well how this works. So let me show you the picture now. Very close to like maybe half a block away from where we are staying in Dallas at their Airbnb, there's a creek. So we've enjoyed just getting in the creek and taking walks, you know, for an hour walking in the creek and then coming back, and beautiful view. And when we were walking last week, we were able to see after the storm that there was this big tree that had fallen and all the roots exposed. You see how tall the roots are. That's Lucy right there standing next to the fallen tree. Now I want to go back to the previous picture, and I want you to pay attention to the left. You see the rocks and the ground going back up, and there you see the trees, and you start noticing the roots. Some of these trees have been there for a long time. They've grown, you know, very mature, and they have all these roots. But the problem is that the terrain in which they were rooted became eroded. And after time and time of erosion, suddenly, unexpectedly, the last drop, you know, that remove some of the soil, caused that tree to collapse. And that tree was firm yesterday, but today it was down. It did not happen just out of the blue. It happened because of erosion. And erosion means that slowly certain factors start affecting the relationship, affecting the roots of the relationship, to the point that suddenly, before you know it, your roots are exposed and boom, you fall. Anytime that you are surprised when you hear that so-and-so got divorced, or that so-and-so was caught in adultery, that so-and-so left the ministry because of adultery, anytime that that happens, it's like taking a picture, seeing a picture of this tree. It's impressive, it's shocking, it's impactful, but it's not abrupt. You can look at the experience of that person and that couple, and as you start paying attention to the previous months and years, it just was a matter of time. So what are these factors that can create erosion? There are going to be 10 eroding factors that we need to avoid. And again, before I go into all these 10 and explain what they mean, let me do a disclaimer. I'm not saying that the reason why, let me say this again. What I'm not saying is that because one of these factors is present, your marriage is going to collapse. I'm not saying that. You can have some of these factors in your relationship and your marriage is not going to collapse, or infidelity is not inevitable, okay? But what I'm saying is that once you have factor 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and before you know it, your marriage starts becoming eroded by all these factors. You can have an accumulation of all these factors where it becomes the perfect storm. And some of these factors have a heavier weight than others. So my point of bringing these factors to you is for you to watch out, so that if any of these factors becomes present in your relationship, you immediately address it. See, the way you avoid erosion, the way you avoid for the tree to fall, is that every time that there's some of the good soil that is, you know, removed by the rains, then you replace it, you see, and you make sure that it's well grounded. You keep that maintenance, addressing the issues. So let's take a look at these 10 factors. If you are going to be intentional in developing a marriage that is adultery proof, then pay attention to these 10 factors. First, emotional distance. Adultery does not start in the bedroom. Starts typically when a relationship has become distant. And this is what starts happening when a couple is emotionally distant, yet they are still physically, sexually active with each other. Every time that they are sexually active with each other is a painful reminder of the emotional distance that they have. And it starts simply creating more and more distance among themselves. Most couples that experience emotional distance also experience sexual distance, but not all the time. And the couples that I have found that are emotionally distant, but yet still very physically active, typically they have a deeper dysfunction in their relationship than those that distance in both dimensions. So if you are growing emotionally distant in your relationship, one thing that you need to do is to address it so that you become close again. Don't let that distance to continue unattended and pursue each other sexually when you are emotionally distant. Don't do that. Address the emotional dimension first, because you will never experience true oneness when you are sexually involved with each other yet emotionally distant. Second one is the lack of physical attraction. When initially, typically in the relationship, there was a level of physical attraction that the couple experienced. But something starts happening that people do take this attraction for granted. They stop caring for their physical appearance. They no longer are healthy. They no longer think that they want to dress in a way that looks attractive to the spouse, and they just lower their guard completely in that regard. And the only time that they try to take care of their physical appearance is when they have to do it for other people. They have to go to a wedding, they have to go to a job interview, they have to go to the office. But to my spouse, no. So suddenly they stop feeding that physical attraction by not longer giving it any importance. And this can create an environment that, depending on the couple, can become difficult, because sometimes a person works in an environment where people really take care of their physical appearance, and only to come home to a marriage where that physical appearance is not being taken care of. And without wanting it, that person starts struggling with physical attraction outside the marriage. Now, there's a dimension that happens as you age. As you age, the belly grows, the wrinkles appear, you lose the hair, and your hair gets thinner. Obviously, you age with time. But if you always fed the relationship correctly, you're going to age like wine. It's just going to get better. Pregnancies come, there's weight that cannot be lost anymore, and things like that happen, throughout the marriage and throughout the relationship in marriage, that are not the aspect I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about the inevitable aging of the relationship. I'm talking about giving importance to the physical appearance. So let me put it this way. Your wife loves when you wear that blue shirt, but she hates when you wear that orange shirt, because she thinks that orange shirts just makes you look terrible. So what shirt are you gonna wear? You see, the blue one or the orange one? Who are you dressing for? You see, now we're talking, right? So it's like The guy that doesn't understand this says, well, the orange one is my favorite because, I got it when I was in college and it has meaningful, so I like it. It's comfortable. So I'm going to wear it. And it's like, wait, your spouse hates that one, but you're going to wear it anyway. Yeah. Okay. Mistake, I would say. See, you are not thinking about presenting yourself physically attracted to the person you marry. Why not? I remember the husband that said, I hate seeing my wife with short hair. I love it when she had long hair. And what did she do? Cut her hair short. And it's like, okay, why did you cut your hair short when you knew your husband hates short hair? Well, because I like it short. So who are you dressing for? Who are you trying to look, your appearance for? For yourself or for your spouse? You see, these couples unintentionally, they're not doing this with malice. They're just ignoring this factor. Lack of physical attraction. When a spouse feels like you don't care about my likes, yet you care about other people's likes, then that person feels you're not treating them with the honor that the relationship should have, and they become discouraged. So pay attention to that. Next one. Rachel, you were going to say something.
So I think there's a power struggle here. What if the wife likes short hair? The thinking will be like, why you don't like me as I am, but you want me to change to what you like? You like, it should be mutual, right? So I know you like long hair, but I also like short hair. So like, who is going to compromise in that sense? Like, do you like me because of my hair, or you like me because of me?
Yeah. But there's a difference. There's a difference in what I would say choice. So let's say I love long hair, and then my wife has cancer and loses all her hair. Would I look at her and say, you look ugly because you don't have long hair? I don't like you anymore. Is that what's going to happen? No, because there's no choice involved, right? There's no decision made by the person. And that the couples that have oneness, that love transcends looks. This is not about looks, but it's about giving the person the honor in the relationship. In other words, if there's something that I know you like, why I'm not going to give it a priority? I'm doing it for you. That is the spirit of it. It's almost like cooking a meal. I know you hate spicy food, but here I'm gonna make spicy lunch. It's like, wait, if you know I hate spicy food, why are you making me a spicy lunch? Well, because I like it. So who are you cooking for? You see? So that there's a dimension of choice that is involved in the relationship in moments when the choice you are making is communicating to your spouse, I don't really care about what you think. And you have to like what I like, whether you like it or not. And I think that's the missing dimension that I'm talking about here. So when a spouse feels that you are not taking their likes or dislikes into consideration at all, and you completely shut it down, that spouse can grow discouraged in the relationship. So again, this is a factor that is an eroding factor. It has an eroding effect. I'm not saying that just because you got your short hair, your husband is going to divorce you, and rightly so. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying this is an eroding factor. Whenever you are married to someone that is not honoring your likes or dislikes in the relationship, that can start creating an erosion. Does that make sense? Okay, so you will discover in the relationship when those things happen, what is the compromise. You will discover that, but keep that in mind. Third one is when the sexual interaction with your spouse becomes a boring routine. There's things that you like for instance, you may like ice cream, vanilla ice cream with a brownie, and you may love that dessert. But if you eat that dessert every single day, suddenly you're gonna get tired of it, and you will say, I like it, but I ate too much of it. I don't feel like it anymore. In marriage, sex can become like that. It can become something that just a routine and becomes boring, and it's like, really again, and it loses its freshness. And whenever it feels routinely and it has lost its freshness, pay attention to it, because that is an eroding factor in the relationship. And one of the things that you need to do is to keep it fresh. It doesn't have to be the same thing all the time. There are different ways in which you can edify each other in this dimension that has lots of different ways and flavors. It doesn't have to be vanilla with the chocolate cake all the time. So whenever the couple starts feeling this way, that's something that you have to think about and talk about, because you want it to feel like this is something that is really edifying and not a boring routine that is becoming a burden. I remember the couple that was struggling this dimension, where for the wife it was like, okay, done, I'm just doing it for him, and they were completely not engaged at all. It was a simple physical act, devoid from any emotional tenderness and connection. So why? It became simply a routine. And the husband was so frustrated because that's not what he wanted. He wanted a closeness. But they had just fallen into that hole of boring routine for them. That's a factor that can affect the relationship. Fourth factor, and by the way, these factors are not in priority order. They're just, a list of factors. Pregnancy. I'm surprised how many couples do not anticipate how much pregnancy can affect their sexual life. And it has very different effects depending on the couple. There are couples that say that during pregnancy, that's when their sex life got the best, because the wife felt much more sexual, and the relationship was great. But for many other couples, it's actually the opposite. Sex was the last thing in their mind, at least in the wife's mind, because it's like, I cannot sleep well, my belly is big, I'm not comfortable. Then after they giving birth, many times when they give birth, their opening becomes wounded. They have to get stitches, and the stitches can take long to heal. There are scars that become now present that were not there before. And anytime there's penetration, now it hurts. And now the expansion of the birth canal, all those muscles were stretched so much that now that they are much more loose. There's no strong control of the muscles anymore. There's not the same level of friction that was before the pregnancy. So all of these factors alter their sexual life completely. And then breastfeeding comes, and the breasts are no longer something that is sexual. It's just a maternal thing. And you touch them and they can release milk, and suddenly the very sexual act is completely redefined. So couples that understand how pregnancy can affect their sexual life, talk openly about these things. What they intentionally do is that they are ensuring that their mutual sexual needs are being met. And rather than unilaterally shutting it down. I will never forget the couple that I worked with, where the husband had left his wife during her pregnancy and committed adultery with a coworker. It was like, really? You committed adultery with a coworker when your wife is pregnant with your child, you know? And when I heard, you know, I learned the story, now I could understand. It's not justifiable, but now I can understand the eroding factor in the relationship. So become aware of that. That's why one of the things that some couples do when they get married is they say, you know, I don't want to have children right away. I want to wait a little bit longer, enjoy each other a little bit more, you know, and maybe after a year or two, then, you know, we think about having kids. They do that intentionally because they do not know how pregnancy is going to affect or alter their sexual life. And beware, your sexual life can be altered for a year, 2 years. It depends on what the effects of the pregnancy were in the body. So that's a fourth factor. Fifth factor, too busy, too tired. People forget that a sexually satisfying relationship requires lots of energy, not only emotional energy, but physical energy. When you are emotionally drained and when you are physically tired, then the last thing that you want is to be sexually engaged with your spouse. It's like, really? Does it have to be now? I'm just so tired. I had such a long day. You know, it's like, okay, let's do it. You know, it can be a burden. So why? Well, because they are already spent, physically and emotionally spent. When the answer to every initiative is, no, I'm too tired. No, I just, not now. It's not a good time. When that becomes the answer by default because you're truly spent, then that's an eroding factor in the relationship. Therefore, in order to avoid this, couples that are intentionally creating an adultery-proof marriage give importance to rest. They give importance to taking breaks. They don't work 7 days a week. You know, they have time off. They take vacations. They have time off to just enjoy, relax, go places. You know, you need to give your body the rest it needs in order to have the energy that it requires, emotionally and physically, because it does require energy to have a sexual, healthy sexual life. Next one, not mutual. The other eroding factor that I've learned throughout the years is when a spouse feels that the sexual life in the marriage is a one-way relationship. And I have only seen this kind of conflict when the wife feels that the husband is the one seeking pleasure, but not giving her pleasure. And this is typically the problem, is that the wife feels that her role is to help the husband reach orgasm, but it does not, the husband is not as intentional in helping her reach orgasm. And if he reaches it first, then it's done, and then she's left there wanting. Whenever a husband is not skilled in helping her wife reach orgasm, then that relationship feels that it's not mutual. And whenever I come to the table, you know, to eat, and you are the only one eating, and you're eating from my plate, it's like, I'm not gonna be happy. So understandably, this struggle only leads to resentfulness, and it creates feelings, I will never forget the wife that says, I feel like a prostitute, only giving sex for exchange of other goods. And for a wife to feel like a prostitute in their own marriage is a terrible place to be. So why is this happening? They're emotionally distant, and the husband is not really giving her the attention that she needs. Next one, number 7, premature ejaculation, or PE. Premature ejaculation has 2 different factors that affect the relationship. One is what I would call the normal PE, the couple that is not skilled, experienced in making love, and therefore the husband does not have the control he needs. He does not know yet how long he lasts, how much friction pushes him over the limit. Whenever the husband doesn't know these things, typically early in the relationship, this could be a problem. But it's a problem that grows out of it because it's something that is learned. Okay, it's like you learn the art of making love and lasting longer. So that is very much workable. But the other problem with PE is when it becomes almost like a physical condition, where the husband simply cannot control himself and always reaches orgasm first. So why is this a problem? If the husband reaches orgasm first and does not give the wife pleasure, then the wife is going to feel like this is not mutual, okay, like 0.6. However, the other problem that comes with PE is that if the husband reaches orgasm first, typically his erection then will stop. And then the wife will not have the friction she needs to experience the pleasures she desires. So that's why this is a problem that needs to be addressed. And for the couples that I've seen this and I work with this problem, typically they seek medical help. But what they've discovered by looking for medical help is that there's really not a lot of physical corrections to this. And the big factor is helping the person reach control through muscle control and different exercises the person goes through. But it's typically not correctable with just a surgery. So if this is a problem in your relationship, that's something you have to pay attention to. Because again, it's going to result in the item on number 6. Number 8, medical conditions. There are some medical conditions that can have an effect in the relationship and can be an eroding factor. And typically these have to do with blood flow. One of the things that you have to understand about the biology of the genitalia and sexual pleasure is that it's all related to the increase of blood flow, both in the female tissue as well as in the male tissue. And whenever there are conditions that affect blood flow, for instance, diabetes is one factor that can affect blood flow in the genitalia, as well as high cholesterol can affect these things. So there are certain physical conditions that have a side effect on your sexual organs that then can have a side effect in intercourse. So if there are medical conditions that are affecting your ability to give each other sexual pleasure, then these are things that you pay attention to, because you don't want to get to the point in which that becomes an eroding factor. I remember the sadness in the tone of this wife whose husband had to have surgery for prostate cancer. there were two options to treat the cancer. One was with chemotherapy, and the other one was with surgery. So the husband did not want to do the chemotherapy. He just wanted to do the surgery. But the problem with the surgery was that it was going to affect then his ability to have erection and to have sex with his wife. But that's what he wanted to do, so that's what they did. And the wife was so sad. And I would never forget just the tone of like, this is what we're gonna do now. This is the option we're gonna go for, and we know this is gonna affect our relationship, and it did. It didn't break the marriage because of the relationship was much deeper than just that. But nonetheless, it did feel like a loss, like a dimension of the marriage that died, with the cancer. So if there are medical conditions, pay attention to them. And if there's a way to address them so that it will rescue your sexual life, then try that first. Because your spouse will need this, from you. Number 9, lack of privacy. This is a factor that many couples ignore, and especially depending on the cultural context you come from. But if the couple is going to have a healthy sexual life, typically having privacy will matter. And whenever you are in a home where you don't have privacy, the kids sleep in your same room, or the noise, very poor insulation in the house, or there are several people living in the house, or you have people visiting you for an extended period of time, all of these things suffer, and typically couples do not think of these things until later. Let me tell you the case of the couple I worked with many years ago, where they were struggling with the marriage. And as I was doing their life story and understanding where they were coming from, I learned that they had decided to have the mother-in-law come and stay with them like for 6 months. And the first thing that came to mind was, I wonder if that affected their privacy. So I asked, and the husband smiled, and because I said, I wonder if that affected your privacy, and then your sexual life got affected too. And the husband smiled, and he said to me, how did you know? And because that's a factor. It's a factor. You have to keep that in mind. So if you're going to practice hospitality, think of how will the hospitality affect this dimension of your marriage, and bring it into consideration. Maybe 6 months might be too long. Maybe you need 2 weeks at a time, and then do it repeatedly throughout the year, but give priority to privacy. And if you cannot have the privacy at home, then find places where you can have privacy. You can go out, couples go out for weekends away so they can be alone and just have that sense of privacy for themselves. Give the privacy, you will not regret it. And finally, pornography. That's perhaps one of the most common of all 10 eroding factors in the relationship. And the reason is that pornography has grown to be a multi-billion-dollar industry that is aggressively trying to get to you without you going to get to it. I remember in the years before internet, to have access to pornography, you had to go to these places to, go the extra mile to be able to have access to these things. You had to buy the magazines, you had to, go to places, you had to be a certain age. But today, you just have a phone and somebody sends you a text. You check a website and you click on a false link and suddenly it displays all these pictures in your computer. And it's aggressively trying to pursue you. So that's why pornography is much more different nowadays than it used to be in the past. It's a very intentional industry that is trying to get to you, and therefore the majority of people that will come to marriage already were exposed to pornography before, to one degree or another. Some side didn't do much with it, other people got hooked to it, and even now that they are married, they're still struggling with it. Pornography may not seem to you like an affair, but it is. In fact, Jesus talked about adultery from the perspective of starts in the mind. If you have committed adultery in your mind, then you have committed adultery, pretty much, is what Jesus said. And that's why there was a wife that wrote a book about her story with her husband who struggled with it, that she called the book The Affair of the Mind. And she explained to the audience how hurtful it was for her as a wife to see her husband struggle with this, because for her it felt pretty much like an unfaithfulness, like infidelity. And the repercussions of it are big because it distorts the mind, it distorts what God's design for sexuality is, and it perverts it. If it's so pervasive and also so intentional, what do you do to fight this eroding factor? Well, you do lots of things. First, if you're struggling with this, then you talk about it. I remember the husband that openly talked to his wife about it, and they decided that one of the things that we're going to do is that he was never going to have a smartphone. So he, every time that he was, going to get his phone, he said, I don't text because it's too hard, and he would openly say, I struggle with pornography. That's why I don't have a smartphone. I just have this dumb phone, and it was one of those that you open up, like this, and you have to dial the numbers. And that was a decision they made. And I was so glad when I heard them speak that way. It's like, okay, you're being intentional. I love that. You do not have a computer that does not have a screen that is visible at home by others. In other words, if you're gonna move your computer so you can be sitting and people walk into the room, the only thing they see is the back of the screen, mistake. Because one wife started growing suspicious of the husband, of why did he move the monitor that way? And one day she decided to go in and start doing a search for his history, his browsing history. To her surprise, she found pornography there, and she never thought that she would, but she was curious. And right, it's like whenever you are going to create lack of accountability, even by the setting of it, you are setting yourself for failure. If you're going to have computers at home, place them in a place where it's visible by everybody. If you're going to have TV with cable that has access to pornographic channels, then don't give each one of your kids their own TV in their bedroom. Only have one TV in the main area and cancel any access to these things, the potential for them. So the place you position computers, the place you have your TVs, the access to channels that you have, all of these things is very intentional. But there's one more thing that I highly recommend too, which is there are accountability softwares that you can create an account with. And what we use in our marriage and in our family with our kids as well is a called iCovenant. You can find it at iCovenant. Oh, sorry, covenanteyes.com. Okay, Covenant Eyes. And what it is that it's a software that is installed in your computer and monitors everything that you see. So it takes screenshots of your computer, of your phone, of your iPad. So every time that you are surfing the internet, every time that you are looking at any software in your computer, it keeps a monitor of the screen. So then it gives you daily emails or weekly or monthly, you set it up, and it sends a report. You choose who it sends it for. So every week we get a report for all of us. And it shows these are the screenshots. And if there's anything questionable, it tells you, where it was, what website, what time of the day, what date. So it's a system for accountability. Okay. So it helps so much because now you know you're being monitored. Even if you turn the screen, you know you're being monitored. But I would like to tell you one more thing about this. The lure of pornography for many, this secret pornography, is the thought of nobody will know. Just one time, nobody will know. And that one time turns out to be many more times. But the idea of nobody will know, that's a deception. Because you know, and therefore you're going to carry the guilt and the shame that comes with it. But most importantly, God knows. And you're accountable to God. And your marriage is accountable to God. So don't forget that you are accountable to God and God knows. Honor God with your body. You belong to Him. So don't ever believe that nobody will know, because at least 2 people already know. And those 2 are enough for you to do something about it, right? So these are 10 factors that I call the eroding factors. Each one of them has a unique power to start slowly eroding the foundations of your relationship to the point in which, before you know it, the tree with all the big roots it has is on the ground. And you didn't see it coming because you were looking at the roots, not at the soil. And sooner or later, it's a matter of time. If the erosion is not addressed, that tree will fall. So if any of these factors are present in your relationship, then pay attention to them, do something about them, address them. Okay, so after we cover those 10 factors, let me say, we first looked at what are 3 perspectives about infidelity, and we discovered that the idea that everybody does it, so it's normal, get used to it. That the idea that, hey, it will never happen to me, only to the lowest of people, are not right. Instead, the Bible says it can happen to you, therefore be watchful, be intentional, make sure that you flee from it, and that you do everything in your power so that it won't happen to you. That level of intentionality that we discovered is manifested in paying attention to these 10 erosion factors that can sooner or later affect your sexual health. So after understanding all these things, let's conclude this section with the true and false. Now, this true and false is where you are going to mark in your notes, and you are going to pay attention to these answers, because they are going to give you the kind of framework for you to discuss with your spouse and do the homework at the end. Okay, so let's go with them one by one. But I do understand that these true and false apply differently depending on whether you're already married or you're engaged, preparing to get married, okay? So I understand that it's gonna be different. However, the factors will still be the same. So here we go. Number one, I'm gonna read one by one, okay? You write true or false in your notes. My parents' marriage suffered from adultery. I was exposed to pornography at home growing up. I have been attracted to pornography in the past. I don't consider myself as capable of sexual immorality. I have been tempted by sexual immorality during our marriage. I think it is acceptable to seek sexual satisfaction outside my marriage. I try to look my best to please my spouse. I wear clothes that my spouse likes and avoid wearing clothes that my spouse dislikes. I honor my spouse's likes and dislikes when I make choices about my physical appearance. I wish my spouse would take better care of himself or herself. As of today, I feel less physically attracted to my spouse than I did when we got married. Our sexual life has fallen into a routine. Sometimes I think of our sexual life is boring. We can improve the love-making experience in our marriage. My spouse and I do not make love often enough. I'm satisfied in how my spouse and I make love to each other. Next section. Pregnancy has altered our sexual life in a negative way. During pregnancy, my spouse and I have been able to satisfy each other sexually. During pregnancy, our sexual experience was improved. My spouse and I have a healthy emotional connection. My spouse and I lack emotional connection. Our lack of emotional connection has decreased my interest in our sexual life. I find myself sometimes wanting to satisfy my emotional needs outside my marriage. I have become susceptible to temptation by relationships that are satisfying my emotional needs. I had an affair that started with emotional connection and developed into sexual intercourse. I often find myself tired or stressed. I have developed a lack of sexual interest due to being too tired or too busy. My spouse often rejects my sexual initiatives because of being tired. We have a balanced life of work, responsibilities, and rest. My spouse and I think of weekly rest and time off as a need that we take seriously. Our sexual life is mutually satisfying. My spouse leads me to experience orgasm with persistence, tenderness, and patience. Too often, our sexual interaction is only to satisfy my spouse. My spouse is selfish in our sexual life, seldom thinking of my needs. I am frustrated with our sexual life because my spouse often fails to lead me to reach orgasm. Sometimes I feel like a prostitute only giving sexual satisfaction to my spouse to get other benefits. And last section. We have never experienced premature ejaculation in our marriage. Premature ejaculation is a problem we are facing in our marriage. The husband is the one who has to take care of his problem with PE. We both have to intentionally work together in solving our problem with PE. My spouse and I have implemented techniques that have helped us eliminate the PE factor. I have high levels of cholesterol or diabetes or blood pressure problems. I have noticed that my ability to experience arousal has decreased dramatically. I am currently taking medicine to help me experience arousal. Even though we have noticed a decreased ability to reach arousal, we have done nothing about it. We have enough privacy at home to enjoy our sexual life. We lack privacy at home for our sexual life, but there's nothing we can do about it. There are things we can do to improve our privacy at home. We have cable or satellite TV at home. We have internet at home. We have our TVs and computers displayed only in open rooms. I suspect that my spouse is struggling with pornography. I am currently involved with pornography. I'm not looking at pornography, but I can be tempted by it. And that's the end of the true and false section. As you can see, this section is very straightforward, and it will help you identify things that have an eroding potential in your relationship. So be very honest in the answers, and then collect the issues that you were able to identify and put them at the end of your notes in the last section of your page, so that you can have this feedback for your conversation about these things. Okay, so one of the things that I want you to do at the end of this session, as you deal with your homework, is that you are going to take a look at these 10 factors, and then you are going to label each one of them from 0 to 10 to see how are they present in your relationship. Medical conditions, lack of emotional connection, lack of physical attraction, lack of privacy, pregnancy, premature ejaculation, pornography, sex is not mutually satisfying, sexual experience has fallen into a routine, and tiredness or stress. So let's say that you say tiredness or stress, oh yeah, you know, that's a big problem. You know, I'm gonna give that a 10. It's really an issue. If you say sex is not mutually satisfying, you say, oh no, that's not really a problem. It's not really an issue for us. So you will put a 0. If it's a little bit of an issue, you put a 1, a 2. Okay, so it's gonna give you a sense of this is not right, wrong answer. This is really just giving you a sense of giving a numerical value to how you feel. Because once you put that number, it really helps you discern how much of an issue it is. And once you compare your numbers with each other in this section, it will give you a platform to really see clearly what you both are saying. What you're gonna discover is that there are some sections that you're both experiencing and seeing eye to eye. You're both thinking, oh yeah, exactly the same. But you may be surprised that there are some areas where for you it's a big problem, for the other person it's not, which means the other person is clueless about it. And that will give you the opportunity to really bring it up. Okay, so that's why this section is very important. So with that, you know, we conclude this session. Now we understand what is the biblical perspective about how intentional we are in making sure that we build a marriage that is adultery proof. And we do so by intentionally avoiding any factor that can lead us into becoming susceptible to adultery. And we become so intentional about it. The more intentional we become about it, the more protected our marriage becomes. So I'm going to stop the share here, and I'm going to stop also the recording. I hope that for those of you that watch the video, you got important insights from it.